5 reasons why President Mwai Kibaki was a failure. Reason number 1, post-election violence. 2007 to 2008, how many people died? 1,500 people died. How many people displaced? 600,000 people displaced. 1992 clashes, how many people died? 1,000 people. How many people are displaced? 200,000. 1982, how many people died? 100 soldiers, 200 people. All of these are estimates, but it gives us an idea of how bad things were during Kibaki's time. The worst violence that we have seen, and the most displaced number of people, IDPs. Reason number 2, failed projects. 1 Jua Kali shed per constituency. Do we have that? Bicycles or motorcycles for community health workers. Do we have that? 200 farming ponds in 140 constituencies out of the 210 constituencies that we had. Do we have that? 2020, the World Bank said that it wanted certain project stops. What is the value of these projects? 1.1 trillion. When did these projects began? Most of them during the Kibaki era. Most of them became white elephants. I think 40% of them during the transition from the Kibaki regime to the President Uhuru Kenyatta's regime. Now, there are certain projects like fish in Nyeri. Why would you begin such a project? Reason number 3, he did not keep his word in 2003. There was a memorandum that was signed, Memorandum of Understanding, on 22nd October 2002. It was between the National Alliance of Kenya and LDP, Liberal Democratic Party. And that merged to form the National Rainbow Coalition. And this was the deal. We would have a constitution, a new one, within 100 days of office. And what would it include? It would include the position of a prime minister. For who? The former prime minister, Raila Odinga. Kibaki did not keep his word. And that cascaded into a whole host of issues that culminated into the 2007-2008 post-election violence. So keeping your word is important, and he did not do that. Number 4, free primary education is delayed failure. Who was the first person to take a crack at free primary education? It wasn't Kibaki. In 1974, Jomo Kenyatta, he took a crack at it, but it was only from grade 1 to grade 4, right? We had to pay for the rest of the primary education phase. So, challenges, of course. Now, in 1979, President Moi took another crack at it, and what he did was he introduced free primary education, the entire primary cycle, right? So not just grade 1 to grade 4. And enrollment during his time increased by what? By 60%. But then we have the structural adjustment programs, IMF and World Bank, and President Moi had to introduce cost sharing. So cost sharing continued until Kibaki came through in 2003, and he introduced free primary education. And guess what? Enrollment increased by what? By 20%. Now, compare 60% enrollment increase under President Moi and 20% enrollment increase under President Kibaki. Who was more of a success when it comes to free primary education? Now, don't be so tough on President Moi because he introduced cost sharing. Remember, it was the World Bank and IMF. Outside influence. Remember, there's a lot of outside influence in free primary education. Even the one that Kibaki introduced. Without donor outside influence, it would not have survived. And even up to today, it cannot survive without donor influence. So it is not a self-sustaining mechanism. Again, it is delayed failure. And CBC is kind of a way of trying to introduce cost sharing, but through the back door. Eventually, we'll get back to that cost sharing. And then eventually, we'll have to, it will just collapse. Like 1974 and 1979, those programs collapsed. Number 5 reason why President Kibaki was a failure, the 2010 Constitution. It was a travesty. It was one of the worst documents to leave your fellow countrymen. Why? Some things in it could not be implemented. For example, the 2/3 gender rule. It was idiotic. You cannot force people to elect a certain gender. The people have to choose. There are other ways, natural ways, of ensuring gender parity within our representation, political representation. Forcing people to choose women or to choose men as leaders is an impossibility, because the people have to look at somebody at an individual level, not gender-based. A very bad constitution, especially when you look at the economic rights and social rights, right? It has the right to healthcare, it has the right to shelter, it has the right to food, and then food of a quality that is acceptable. Now, here's the thing. Even in the Bible, it is written, right? He who shall not work should not eat. So how can you guarantee a right to food? It is an impossibility. It is something very idiotic to have in a constitution, and it places undue pressure on the government to do something that it should not do. And where does that government place the pressure? It is on the citizens. So that means we'll always have taxes being pushed to idiotic ideas that will never be biblically itself. They cannot work. No one has a right to food. People have a right to conduct their businesses in a system of justice, in a system of low taxes. And then when you do that, you earn income and then you buy food, right? If you don't want to work, then you should not eat, as the Bible says. There is no right to that. Again, there is no right to healthcare. The only free healthcare that exists is a miracle. Everything else, there's a cost to it. So either you are paying for it, or another citizen is paying for it. Again, placing undue pressure on the government and on the citizenry for things that will never work, instead of ensuring that people have the right environment to produce jobs and to work and to make profit and to have enough disposable income from their wages. A very bad constitution that he left. Also a very confused constitution. Why? The CJ has given advice for the president to dissolve parliament. So what does that mean? Has parliament been dissolved until today? Right? So what does advice to the president mean? It's a very confused constitution, and it causes a bit of constitutional crisis from one time to another, where something is done but the next step is not known. Something is done but the organ to implement is not known. A very bad constitution to leave your people, honestly speaking. A lot of dormant issues in this constitution. For example, general rules of international law shall form part of the law of Kenya, without specifying that they should move through parliament. In this age of globalization, they can make very stupid laws, at international conventions, and then we have to adopt them as our law. Or some minister will ratify them as our law, some cabinet secretary, and we'll just wake up to that. And then we'll be told it's in your constitution. It's a very stupid thing to have in a constitution. When you have abortion, right? The same words that were used for abortion in the UK are the same words that we have for abortion, the abortion clause in our constitution. Again, people are trying to give life to these dormant words. Example, the Reproductive Health Bill, Abortion Bill by Susan Kihika. It was trying to do that. It was stopped, but somebody will try again. When you look at the Kadhi's courts, one, expanding the courts from the coast to across the country, very stupid move, right? Why do that? Just keep them where they are, and perhaps you can discuss them again in future. Again, increasing the powers of the Kadhi's courts. Again, increasing the scope of the Kadhi's courts, like what the matters they're supposed to deal with. And again, having those courts such that we citizens, we pay for that. As in, you're just kicking the can down the road. These are issues that they will bring problems in time, right? And as a leader, you're not supposed to to make it worse for your children to sort a problem, right? You're supposed to make things more clearer and more better, and remove impediments or possible sources of conflicts before you leave office. So that is why I also say that Kibaki was a failure. Left a bad constitution with many issues.